Mm-hmm.
All right. How are you otherwise?
I'm good. I'm very happy to be here and out of New York.
I hear you.
I have a lot more space and it's just very peaceful.
That's nice. All right, we'll get started soon. So yeah, it's going to be roughly 30 minutes of us and then roughly 30 minutes of whoever has something to say.
All right.
Thumbs up. So we're going to start in about 2 minutes.
All right. Sounds good.
Did you people? No, never mind. I'll talk to you offline.
Okay.
About other things.
Hey, excited for this. I'm Amelia. We haven't met, but hello and hello to everybody.
Hello.
Hey, Amelia. Let's see. When we start, are we able to mute everybody? Is that a power we have?
Yeah, you can pretty much mute whoever you want.
Okay. All right. I think we're gonna start. Should we start?
Sure.
All right. I have 6:59. I'll wait. I'll be punctual. All right, we're starting. Whoever is out there, you can show your faces or not. It's up to you. Let me make this full screen so I can see better. Welcome to St. Francis College right in Brooklyn. This is an annual event where we have free public dialogues with the most exciting writers of our time. St. Francis College MFA writing program hosts this, which is the only low residency MFA writing program in New York City. We offer MFAs in fiction, poetry, playwriting, screenwriting, and what medium am I missing? Poetry. I said poetry. And my name is Ben Snyder. I'm the coordinator of dramatic writing tracks. And one of my favorite things about this position is I get to talk to my most talented, interesting friends, one of whom it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to, Michael R. Jackson, very dear friend of mine, celebrated playwright, musical theater maker, Pulitzer Prize winner, probably most known for A Strange Loop, also many other irons in the fire and works that we love like Teeth and White Girl in Danger. But you can look him up. He's done a lot of amazing things. He has albums out there that you can buy. Michael, thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm good, Ben. It's good to see you.
Michael, tell us about your t-shirt.
I'm wearing a t-shirt. You can't see all of it. Maybe I have to stand up. It says imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchy with strike-throughs, and it says hashtag bell hooks on the bottom. This was a t-shirt that was largely designed by Ben that I have 7 copies of, and I wear it everywhere.
By a show of hands and emoji reactions, who's familiar with Michael Jackson's work in our virtual room? Okay, some people are waiting to get in. Cool. I thought I would start with one of my favorites. Is that okay? Can I I play a song of Michael singing Michael? Is that okay? A short one?
It's fine.
We were gonna try to do it live, but that felt a little complicated. So I'm just gonna play a song, and more people are joining us, and then we'll get into our conversation. How this is gonna go is I'm gonna ask Michael some questions. We're gonna have a conversation, and then quickly we will open it up to you all, and you can ask questions. And those can be you speaking live as a human, or those can be typed into a chat, and we'll read them off. But we'll just go in the order that things appear in a chat. And I'm gonna play a song right now. Hopefully you guys are on my screen. This is one of my favorite Michael Jackson songs.
A loud ass baby around in a carriage. No, I'll just walk around with a scowl on my face like I'm Betty Friedan. Because the second wave feminist in me is at war with the dick-sucking black gay man. He's not looking for now as much as 15 years later. And so the grinder crowd turns me into a chronic stay-at-home masturbator. When I want to go out on a Saturday night, I don't feel that I can. Because the second wave feminist in me is at war with the dick-sucking black gay man. So I fall outside of the norm. 'Cause I burn my bra to keep warm. But while most of my brethren sworn to Britney and Rihanna and bareback and belching and so on, but they won't get AIDS. 'Cause now they're taking Truvada. And I don't know what to say, so I stay in my corner and I just say nada. And watch them all do what they want without fear and without having a plan. Meanwhile, the second wave feminist in me is at war with the dick-sucking black gay man. So nobody comes on my chest. And I come off sounding repressed. But maybe that's all for the best. If I want something deeper, and someone who thinks I'm a keeper, and who can understand my long hesitation, and who will take my hand and help me undo this polarization, and lets me curl up with Charlene, Mary Jo, Julia, and Suzanne. Until the second wave feminist in me ends the war with his dick-sucking black gay man.
All right. Claps, claps, claps. So beautiful.
I was so drunk when I did that. It was hilarious.
We got to it.
I got through it, but I was a little into my cups.
What I didn't say that I want to say is I've been enjoying Michael Jackson's work for 20 years, maybe over 20 years. And
21. Well, 20 years, yeah, because I think I didn't meet you until like second year or something.
I've been a huge fan. It's just so nice to see friends getting recognized when we know when our friends are good, and we're waiting for the world to catch up with that, and the world is catching up with that quickly. So Michael, how did you get into storytelling? What was your way in as a writer to were you always as a little kid, or how did it start for you?
I guess it probably started, as a little kid. I kept a journal, and because like I felt as a little kid like I wasn't heard a lot, and so I wrote a lot of my thoughts into my journal that I kept. And I also was involved in like children's theater, and I sang in choirs, and so I was very artistically inclined. And I just think that like all of that, and I also read a lot. Like I was a big reader as a little kid, and so I think I was so excited about reading that I wanted to imitate what I was reading. And so like a lot of my early writing was me imitating the writers that I was reading at the time.
Who were your big influences?
I mean, as a little kid, it was like Jackie Collins and Stephen King. Like those were the two. So I had like two phases. I began like as a 11-year-old, 12-year-old writing like steamy, like as steamy as it could be for me, like copying Jackie Collins. And then I got in trouble for reading Jackie Collins stuff. And then I started reading Stephen King, and then I started writing like horror, sci-fi short stories. Like that was, and then that sort of led to like more like poem. I started writing poems, and like I said, like there was a period where I was kind of imitating like Maya Angelou. Like I was just very impressionable in that way in the early years until I got to high school.
How did music fit into all of that? Were you always writing music?
So I started taking piano lessons when I was about 8 years old with my brother, who's a couple of years older than me. And that sort of that then moved into me, and I learned how to play by ear primarily. And then that translated into me starting to play songs at church, because the woman who taught me piano was also her church pianist. And like, so I started playing piano at my church because they wanted me to be involved with the choirs and stuff. And a lot of, and I grew up Baptist, so like a lot of Baptist choir stuff is just like a lot of improvisation, and the chords and figure it out. And so that just sort of led to me, when I would practice at home, I would just like start making up chord changes, and I had a really good ear for music generally. And so that just sort of led to me, starting to make up my own little tunes, but I didn't know how to write lyrics, because I was writing poems, but I couldn't figure out how to put music to the words.
What's the difference between a poem and a lyric?
They're both forms where you're taking big ideas and squeezing them down into small ideas, but lyrics usually have they have a tighter structure. Like there's song form, like whether it's AABA, verse, chorus. You can certainly break out of that in all kinds of ways. There's opera does that, recitative, art songs, that sort of thing. But at the most basic level, songs have a kind of strict structure in order for the ear to be able to follow musical ideas. And whereas poems are you're taking big ideas, but your structure is kind of boundless. You can do whatever you want with it.
So you're writing poetry and music and journaling. How does that turn into theater?
It didn't really turn into theater until I went to college, because when I was in high school, I'm from Detroit, Michigan, and I went to Cass Tech, and Cass had a really great sort of like English department. And the head of that department was this woman named Deborah Thompson, who brought in this program called Inside Out that brings teaching artists into the schools so that kids have an outlet for writing, but also so they can see writing as sort of more than just a hobby. And so I worked with writers in residence like my entire 4 years of high school. I took one of those writers, did a private workshop at his house that I took. I went to the Michigan Youth Arts Festival as a writer every year that I was in high school. And then one year, one of the writers in residence read a short story that I had written, and she said, "This is very cinematic. Have you ever thought about screenplays?" And I said, no, because I just thought at that time that movies kind of sprang out of the ground. And so, you know, long story short, I ended up going to NYU for dramatic writing, thinking that I would write for soap operas, which is the form that I really loved, because I grew up watching soap operas from like a little kid. But I fell in love with theater because in my first year, you have to take like playwriting classes, screenwriting classes, etc. And they took us to see a lot of plays. And I grew up like doing children's theater, and my mother and I would go and see musicals, but like we went and saw a lot of straight plays as well as an undergrad. And I just fell in love with that form. And that ended up being, even though my dream was sort of to write for television through soap operas, I was becoming more and more enamored with like playwriting as like sort of my main vehicle. And then that led to me going to grad school for musical theater writing to study book writing and lyric writing specifically. And then it was there, once I got a hang on lyric writing, a teacher said, if you're a lyricist who's never written music before, or a composer who's never written lyrics, you want to try it for this assignment, go for it. So then the musical impulses that I had had since I was like a little kid had somewhere to go. So then I tried writing my own song, and the song that came out of that class was Memory Song, which is a song in a strange loop. And that song went over really well in my class, and I was encouraged to continue writing my own music, even though for my thesis project for my second year, I was going to be paired with a composer. So I just, because I had been encouraged, I just kept writing my own little songs on the side just for me. And then it just gradually, more and more people would hear what I was doing and kept encouraging me, and it just sort of took on a life of its own.
So you had a lot of formal training, both undergraduate and graduate. What were some of the, in a short soundbite, what were some of the most important craft lessons you learned as a writer? I imagine there's a lot of writers on this Zoom right now.
I think one of the most important things I learned was the definition that my first year craft teacher gave me of a story. It's a character wants something, they're presented with obstacles, and they either achieve, abandon, or fail their story purpose. And that's been something like, no matter what I'm writing, because in terms of narrative storytelling, that I'm always thinking about when I'm writing. I found it to be a helpful way of thinking about story. And then also, I think one thing I learned was to sort of to thine own self be true, to sort of honor whatever your obsessions are. That was something that like a teacher of mine from high school, one of the teachers and the artists in residence in my high school, was a big proponent of like, identify what your obsessions are and write about the same thing over and over and over and over again. Because those are your themes, and those are the things that you are most invested in. And I've done that in a lot of ways.
As a professional writer, were there any lessons that you've now learned that you didn't get in school that might have been useful?
Yeah, about saving money.
Say more.
Seriously. I mean, well, this is the things that like, I went to NYU on like completely borrowed money. And like, no one really, really deeply explained what it would mean to do that and then graduate and not like be writing for television or movies or something, and not have a way of making money that you knew of, and that you have to pay that money back. And that it actually creates the whole circumstance for your life as you're pursuing your art or whatever it is that you're doing while you're pursuing your art. And like, I just think that like if someone had been clearer with me, or if I had been clearer with myself about that was going to be, that was part of the cost of what it meant for me to be a writer, if I wasn't going to really be pursuing something that was super commercial, that like I could have like more intentionally moved through my life instead of feeling like, you know, I was living in a living hell of creation that I didn't understand. Because for many years I just was like, why am I suffering so much? Oh, it's because you like owe all this money and you don't know how you're gonna pay it back. But like I could have gone into that with more like knowledge and straightforwardness. And I think the teachers in a lot of these schools can be more helpful into preparing people for doing that if they're going to be going, especially to this like very expensive conservatories and private schools and that kind of thing. I mean, a lot of other people were like naturally smarter than me, so they knew that going into it and they like prepared. I just wasn't. But it's something that I think is really important.
Yeah, I was in my first year of grad school when the NEA, National Endowments for the Arts study came out that said the top wage earners of playwrights on average got like $40,000 a year, which means nobody makes a living as a playwright. And no one told us it's not a career, it's not a profession.
Well, I mean, but I guess like but it also depends. Like it might, $40,000 a year might be enough if you don't have any debt.
That's what David Mamet makes, right? That's
my guess is that David Mamet has never really had any debt. If I didn't have any debt, $40,000 a year, I know how to stretch a dollar. I could do that if I didn't have any debt. But like when you leave school with $40,000 of debt that's accruing interest every day, that's like a different situation than, oh, I only make $40,000 a year.
How did you go from being an usher on Broadway and kind of like struggling for people to read your work, let me in the door, let me just listen to my song, to everyone wants a piece of you now? How did that happen?
So I started ushering at the Lion King in 2003. That was the year I went into grad school. Like I started doing that about the same time. And it was just like a kind of part-time job to make some extra money while I was in grad school. And then it carried on for 5 years after that. And I, you know, it was like the first time that I really saw like Broadway up close, tourists and that whole, what they liked to see on stage. And I realized during that time that like, oh, I don't do that. Like, that's not what I make. It's not what I'm interested in making. And, you know, but it was, on some ways that was disheartening, but in other ways it was very freeing because I was like, oh, I don't do that, so I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. So like I had started writing A Strange Loop as A Strange Loop started off as a monologue that I had written when I was just about to leave undergrad. And it actually got performed at Center Stage, the old Center Stage in New York, because Ben had introduced me to Developing Artist that was then going through the Center Stage in New York. And the monologue got performed in Rebel Verses, which was a theater festival that was happening. And then from there, like I started writing songs, started trying to put the songs with the monologue. That started to take on another form. Like that, I was doing that all at the same time that I was ushering, and then ushering became a part of the story. So just also for clarity, A Strange Loop is a musical about a Black gay musical theater writer who works as an usher at a Broadway show, who's writing a musical about a Black gay musical theater writer who works as an usher at a Broadway show, who's writing a musical about a Black gay musical theater writer who works as an usher at a Broadway show, ad infinitum, and sort of circling through his own perception of himself and his own self-hatred. And so it was like, you know, and it's not an autobiographical musical in a traditional sense. I think of it more as emotionally autobiographical. And so I was like, while I was working at the Lion King, I was just like trying to sort of work through this experience of what does it feel like to be in a Black queer body and like experience the world internally and externally at the same time. And, you know, so what that was like was, you know, profoundly miserable a lot of the time and hilarious and devastating and funny and just like, it was everything. It was just real life. But like, it took me a long time of just like my own personal self exploration to understand what the actual story was. And then as that happened, the work deepened, like my other work deepened, and like the world also was changing throughout all of that, because I started writing this, I was trying to put this all in the political context. The monologue was written not that long after September 11th. And so then A Strange Loop had its sort of somewhat formal beginning in the first Bush term. It then kept developing in the second Bush term. It then was developing in the first Obama term. It was then getting closer in the second Obama term. And then in the first days of Trump being elected, we had our first reading at Playwrights Horizons, which is where it ultimately ended up being produced the following, like 2 years later. Because we literally had our reading for the artistic director at Playwrights Horizons on November 11th, 2016. And that ended up being, for me, really significant because my piece has nothing to do with Donald Trump or anything like that, but it is a piece that like has accumulated political meaning or like context over time, and it just is to me significant that like in this sort of like resistance present of 2016, that the piece suddenly there was a critical mass of people who were like, we need to do this piece. I mean, well, really 2017, but it was like that I don't know, that just seems like a really important thing to point out. Yeah. I forget where I got off track with this.
It's great. I'm gonna ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna ask 2 more questions, and then I'm gonna open it up to our viewers. Just right off of what you said, what do you think is the role and or responsibility of an artist to respond or not respond to the political times we are living in?
I think the role of the artist is to always tell the truth. And to me, what that means is I feel that great art can be either a mirror or it can be a window. And sometimes it can be both. And I think that the artist's role is to really be able to have enough self-inquiry to be able to intentionally create a mirror or a window of what is happening in the world and what contradictions or what truths they're trying to get the audience to see. That if I'm an artist and I'm making something, I see something a certain way, I want to get the audience to see what I see. And in order for me to get the audience to see what I see, I have to be clear with myself about what it is I want them to see and all of the complexities of it, which is why, some people have been asking me in interviews, I've been saying that I see a lot of what I term shitty partisan art out in the world. And that's because I feel there is like a trend of people who sort of just have some political conviction and all they want to do is just say, here's my political conviction and it is right. And I feel the artist has to me, this is my opinion, there's some people who are like, no, but I feel the art that I'm most interested in seeing and that I think is the most powerful is the art where the artist has really questioned themselves and fought with themselves to find a truth that they then are able to share with the audience and let the audience meet that perception wherever they are, and decide for themselves and be energized by that and take that out into the streets.
Are we recording this? That's our sound bite for the web. That was beautiful. My last question, I was going to ask you what you're working on next. I'm not going to ask you that. I want to ask, like, what are you thinking about? What are you angry about? What are you excited about? What's going on in your head? What's on your mind, Michael Jackson?
Oh my gosh. I mean, what is on my mind? I mean, since this sort of pandemic began, have been really in a sustained state of self-care, because I feel like we're watching and witnessing a lot of the sort of pre-existing inequities play themselves out in like a lot of ways. And we're as a country, as a planet, are like reacting to that in a variety of ways. And I've just been finding this time to be one of self-reflection and sort of dreaming about I'm finding myself thinking a lot of looking to the past and dreaming to the future. And I'm really have been trying to challenge people as they are in despair and sadness or whatever, is to not forget their dreams. So like I'm thinking a lot about my dreams for the future and my dreams for art in the future, and like the sort of stories that I want to tell, and like the sort of, realities that I'd like to see in the future.
Well, all right. I'm going to open up this conversation, but I reserve the right to jump back into it if I think of something else I want to say or ask. All right.
Okay.
Worst questions are more fun. Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. I'm in love. You are amazing. Loving this. So wonderful. That was endearing. Here's a question. All right. We got some questions. And if you have a question that you've thought of, you can put it in the chat. Or you could say, I'd like to say it for myself, and when I get to you, I'll say your name, and you'll unmute yourself, and you'll speak directly to the man. Here's a question. Why aren't these schools offering any financial assistance to those wanting to enter their arts programs? How can someone who doesn't want to go into debt find additional funding, especially during these times? Now, I don't know if Michael is an expert in this. Do you have anything to add to that question?
Well, I think that's a fair question, but I also think, and this is, I guess, something else I'm thinking a lot about, is I see a lot of these reckonings taking place inside the theater, outside the theater, and elsewhere. Is that like, my question is like, I guess it's, we live in a system of capitalism. And capitalism is inherently about the exploitation of labor in order to make a profit. And within that system, we have a limited set of choices, but we do have choices. And so the thing that I sort of would offer, if I could just use my own experience as an example, I had a full scholarship to go to Michigan State when I was 18 years old. I opted to not do that, and for me and my parents to take out loans so that I could move to one of the most expensive cities in the world to study playwriting. That was a choice. Like no one made me do that. Like I made the choice to do that. And so I think that you can make those choices to do that, but you have to like stop and go, what does that mean to do that? And so, but at the same time, the school that I went to, New York University, is a corporation. It is a capitalist system that is only trying to exploit as much labor as possible to make the most profit. If people become great artists out of that, that's like a gravy to them. And there is something really fucked up about that but that is the system. And so they should offer, you know, more scholarships to people, and they should offer more financial aid, and they do. And often that financial aid that is offered to people who do not need it. And because there are systems of nepotism and favoritism that lead to all kinds of unfairnesses in this system that is about the exploitation of labor in order to make a profit. So the only thing that I can really say to that question is that understand that system of exploitation and figure out how much you are willing to be exploited by it, or how much you are willing to exploit, or find another way. You don't actually have to go to New York University to learn how to write plays. You don't have to go, you can find other ways to become a storyteller. It's not necessarily gonna be the most profitable way maybe, but then that's another reason why you have to think about what is your relationship to profit? What are you actually trying to get by going to a school like New York University? Are you trying to get into a pipeline? Are you trying to become part of that system? Or are you trying to operate outside of it? I just think everybody has to be like really intentional about what it is that they want. And I'm not gonna say there's a right way or wrong way. I identify as a pro-Black, anti-capitalist theater artist. And I exist in a deeply racist and capitalist system. And so the tension and the contradiction of that is constantly on me at all times. And so the only thing I can control is my work. So the tension of that goes into my work. And so that's why A Strange Loop for me is so significant, because the marketplace didn't have space for that piece for 18 years of my developing artist life. But once the market and the culture shifted, the work I had been doing happened to be a commodity that they were ready for. And I was also very lucky that I stuck with it enough to be able to present it. With the help of lots of collaborators and people behind me. I also had lots of support along the way, even if I was like totally broke like the whole time. But again, it's just about thinking about what's your relationship to profit? How much are you willing to be exploited? How much are you willing to exploit? Or do you not want to participate in that at all? And all of that is and then the bigger picture of that is like, or do we want to like destroy a racist capitalist world altogether? You know, like, do we want to remake the world into one where the government, where funding for the arts is sacrosanct? Like, you see what I'm saying? There's just lots of different pathways and ways of thinking about it that are not just why doesn't this school give me more money to pursue this art?
The next question I see is, do you have any advice for someone who's trying to get published?
So A Strange Loop is going to be published this fall. And that will be, I guess, the first thing of mine that's ever really been professionally published. When I was in high school, I had things published in like literary magazines. I mean, one way to do it is to self-publish, which I don't have any experience in that, but you can certainly research how to do that. I guess another way to get published is if you know people. I'm sorry, I don't actually have a great answer for this. I'm sorry, I should have just said that from the beginning. I don't have a great answer. A publisher approached me after the show happened, and they're going to publish it. I wouldn't have known what to do other than that before that.
There's a question, do you have a specific process that you go through when you sit down to write or create a show?
So in musical theater, normally it begins with a song or like an idea for a song. And I'll write a song that might suggest a show, or like I might have an idea for a show and I need to find the song that helps me figure other things out. it just sort of depends on the piece. Sometimes like a snippet of dialogue will appear in my head, and that just becomes a seed that I plant on a blank sheet of paper, and I just have to keep tilling at the ground of the blankness until a story comes out of it, or it comes in different ways for me. But
what are the pieces of art that have inspired you most? Whether it's a book, a TV show, a movie, a play.
I think one of the first playwrights who really inspired me, and this is actually one of the reasons why, like, I think I began to get more interested in playwriting than just like wanting to write a soap opera or like work for a soap opera, was Craig Lucas. I had a playwriting class in undergrad called Contemporary American Playwrights, where our teacher would have contemporary American playwrights come in to speak to us. Like, we'd read their plays and then they'd come and speak to us, as opposed to like us reading works from the canon. And Craig came in and he had written this like really dark gay play that I just was totally blown away by. And I started reading some of his other works that sort of had a dark
title? What was that?
The title of that play was Stranger. And then I read shortly right after that, I think we read two plays, Stranger and The Dying Gaul. And both of those plays at that time, I was like 20 years old, really spoke to me just in the audacity of them. And then I read some of his other works, and I just felt very much in love with like the idea that you could write a play that was like that dark and gritty. And I just was really into it. And he became a mentor of mine for a while. And then we like had a falling out, and then now we're good again. For like a long time. We didn't speak for like 10 years. But like, that was an early person who inspired me. But also like things from, like, I remember there's this really great anthology of African-American poets called In Search of Color Everywhere that I read in high school, that introduced me to people like June Jordan, who her writing style just knocks me out. And I think I borrowed a lot from specifically this poem she wrote called Poem About My Rights, which I think everyone should read, and you should read it out loud. It's so good. So like there were people like that really inspired me. Like I remember seeing the movie Happiness by Todd Solondz. To this day is one of my super faves. Who else? I mean, my inspirations come from truly everywhere. And a lot of, and you always, sometimes you won't even know the inspiration is in something that I've written.
There's a question, what is the best entry-level job for writers at this point in time?
Oh, Lord.
You don't have to have a big
I'm saying, oh, Lord, because that's a little bit connected to my little sermon from earlier about what is your relationship to profit and capitalism. Because I worked as an usher for a while. I was temping. So like when I was temping at a temp agency, I was doing just some of everything. I delivered cookies. I did flyering for Rock of Ages, his Broadway show, where I had to stand at the TKTS booth and try to get people to buy tickets to see Rock of Ages. Then I got a full-time job as through my temp agency as a finance clerk at an advertising agency, and I lost 5 years of my life to like racism and capitalism.
Were these good entry-level positions for writers?
I mean, it was in the sense that like it kept me going. It kept the roof over my head. I had health insurance. I also was completely miserable. I was an executive assistant for a year and a half. But it sort of depends on, you have to like be very clear with yourself about what you're willing to put up with in order to fund your art. Some people find these kinds of day jobs that are really fulfilling to them. Like Ben, you've done like a lot of teaching artist stuff, and that, I think from talking to you, that has been very fulfilling, and you're good at it. I never figured out how to become a teaching artist. That might have been something that would have sustained me, and I would have felt less gross and depressed every day, you know? So I guess like the best entry-level jobs are the ones that you can get that you can live with, that will allow you to still have the time to work on your art. But only you will know what that is. So it's not like I can't say, oh, you could do this or you could do that. I mean, some people I know do transcription work, and that's like really easy for them. Or like it's, you know, they don't have to deal with other people. They just get the work and they do it. Some people really are into being personal assistants and doing that kind of work. Some people, you know, figure out how to work in, you know, hotels, like doing like concierge work. Like it just really depends on you. Like what can you put up with, and that will allow you the time to pursue your art.
There's a question. I'm gonna unmute the person. They wanted to ask their own question about truth. Can I unmute them? M. Douse, I'm not unable to unmute you. Sorry. Unmute the audio. Did I unmute you? Question about truth. Do you want to ask your question?
I'll unmute.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I somewhere in the middle of your words, you said about partisanship and playwrights who, I don't know, I don't recall the exact words, but I think what I got was that they have a position and they want to propagate that. I don't know whether I'm getting that right.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, I sat in Vietnam protests, occupied buildings, sat in the middle of Wilshire Boulevard. I have 8 decades going of stuff that is happening in societies. So my question is this, that I completely concur that using art as propaganda was Bolshevik stuff. Mayakovsky, the poet, did it. But on the other hand, there can't be moral equivalence between, there is evil. There are people who wish no good to other people, and an artist has to represent truthfully the humanity of the quote other side, but there is other side. Now, I don't know whether I'm saying it right.
No, I hear you.
In other words, it's a luxury. There's no moral neutrality. Ptolemy and Copernicus can't meet in heaven and be nice to each other and say it's neither a circle nor flat, but somewhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
And so there is I'm just a starting playwright, and a 10-minute play of mine is being played in Houston about the contemporary issues. And there's a Trumpian person, and I try to, I have worked with factory workers in Ohio, and I try to represent as truthfully as possible. But finally, one has to say the truth is not an average, but a median.
Mm-hmm. Were you done with your statement? Because I was gonna gently ask you to get to a question, just because there's other people we want to get to.
Yes, please.
You're done. Okay. Michael, did you want to respond to that?
So my response to that is, I'm certainly not someone who would ever advocate for like moral relativism. But what I would say is that what I believe art is really good at is showing if you have a perspective that you're trying to get across, that you can, I don't think it's going to be effective for you to get it across by presenting it as though there is nothing in opposition to it. And also, your point of view itself is going to Like if I wanted to do, like, if I can use the example of talking about Trumpian whatever, like, I hate Donald Trump. Like, I think he's like a despicable, horrible, awful person. Like, personally, like, I think he's a bad politician. I think all kinds of negative things about him. However, I also think that the other side has lots of flaws that led to the rise of someone like Donald Trump. And so if I were inclined to write a story about how much I hate Donald Trump, if that were my goal, or how I think he's bad, or his side is bad, or whatever that is, I would have to talk about the other side, and like what flaws and weaknesses and traits contributed to someone like that being able to become the president of the United States. I mean, that's how I would have to do it. But none of that means that I think that Trump is good, or that like they're both the same. Like, it's not necessarily that. It's like until I interrogate my own side and my own self and my own ego and my own, and by I don't mean Michael R. Jackson, but like whatever that point of view is, until I really interrogate that, I'm not going to be able to have an argument. It is just going to be propaganda. And there's a place for propaganda. Propaganda can be effective, but like, it's not, to me, it's not really art, in my opinion.
There's an idea in dramatic writing that that the only arguments worth dramatizing are ones in which both people are right, where each people have truth. Otherwise, why are we watching the argument? I'm gonna throw a few questions at you, Michael.
Okay.
And we'll see what sticks, and I'm gonna make sure we hit everyone before we are out of time. Do you have tips on self-producing plays or monologues? Have you felt discouraged, and how did you come through that? And what will New York City theater look like post-COVID?
I haven't really done any self-producing. Like, the only self-producing I've done has been through, like, with other people, where there was some existing infrastructure. So I'd say, like, if you can get a group of artists together to do something to help self-produce, that'll always make it easier. And there's lots of models out there for that kind of thing. Like, there was a group that used to produce their own work called 13P in New York. There were a bunch of writers who they just produced each other's work. And they did each other's fundraising and each other's marketing and all of that stuff. Like, that's one way of doing it. But like, in general, just like finding a group of people to help do it together. The second question was about being discouraged. Yes, I've been like super discouraged many times in my life and career. But the thing I would say about that is, the thing that the epiphany that I sort of had is that my discouragement was about kind of two things. It was about, how do I survive in this like capitalist world where like I can barely pay my rent and I have to work this horrible job and I hate my racist boss, and like there was that. And then there was like, ugh, why are these terrible musicals getting produced? And why is the art out there so bad? Like, I felt both of those things, and both of those things encouraged me to make my own work and to write and to create. And that like that's what like sometimes my anger and desperation led to me putting my pen to paper. Right. And then the third question was about, what do I think theater will look like post-COVID? You know, I don't know. Like, I feel like that changes every day. Like, I mean, in some ways, maybe we'll never actually really be post-COVID. Like, we may just have to adapt to living in a COVID world and still making work making theater. Like, it may just be that we have to figure out like what the cost benefit analysis of that is. I don't know, like that sounds like really gross and neoliberal, but like that it may be that, or it may be, you know, that there is a vaccine that is mass produced and that there's some process by which that is hopefully safely and fairly distributed to all people who need it and who want it, or that hopefully everyone will do it. Like, I mean, there's that, but I guess my short answer is that I do think that there will be a theater world either post-COVID or intra-COVID, you know, like that. I think that there will be something. I also think that people will redefine for themselves what theater is. There's a lot of online theater stuff that's happening that may end up having like a boom, because there will be people who are not going to feel comfortable going back to brick and mortar theaters to watch shows, and they may be more interested in what people are doing online. I think there's going to be a lot. Everyone's going to answer this question in lots and lots of ways. If the question is about commercial Broadway theater, my feeling is that there's so much money at stake, and capitalism will always find a way.
I see 3 more questions that we're going to get to before we close this out. There's one, as an alumni of an educational institution, do you feel the responsibility to mentor, to help out people that are kind of sitting where you once sat?
I try to be of service to whomever I can, whenever I can. I mean, my career is still sort of growing, and so I don't have like a ton of dedicated time to help lots of individual people. But like if people have questions for me, I try to be available by email or by, you know, I'm on some social media. I've recently left Facebook, so I'm not available there anymore. I left there on Independence Day. But if someone writes to me on Twitter or Instagram, I try to answer questions and that kind of thing. The thing I'm not good at is like, please read my script, or like, someone wrote to me, do you think that I am the right person to write this story? I'm not good at that kind of mentoring. But I try to be helpful to who I can when I can. And I just ask that people respect boundaries, and I try to respect boundaries as well.
So speaking of which, there's someone who says, what tips do you have for a beginning playwright with no formal training? How many drafts do you need? How do you get your work read? How do you know when you're done with a play?
So I would say beginning playwrights should read as many plays as they can, just to start to get a sense of how stories are told and how different writers tell stories. And then from there, you know, I think like you'll get the bug will bite you or it won't, and you'll start trying your hand at your own thing. I'd say write down your list of obsessions. What are ideas or topics that you're obsessed with? Write those things down. Keep writing them down. Journal. Your journal entries might reveal ideas for stories to you. But like, and then, you know, write your stories out, write your ideas out in a story form, like prose. Like, this is a story about X, who, and then X, that kind of thing. Though there's lots of tools that you have at your disposal to help inspire you and to get you just writing. But I would say start first by reading.
Last question before we start to wrap it up. Someone's curious, how do you meet the people you need to meet? You need a teammate for collaboration. You need someone to fund your work. How do you connect with people in this field?
I mean, for me, it was by going to school. That was a pipeline that I entered, and from there I met Ben, and Ben was someone, for example, who was very a go-getter And anybody who knows him knows that Ben is like dogged and determined, and nothing will stop him. And he was someone who introduced me to developing artists at Center Stage New York, which introduced me to a director named David Anzuelo, which then led to me meeting other people in the Labyrinth Theater Company, which then at NYU grad school, one of my teachers introduced me to this woman named Maria Goyanes, who was working at the Public Theater for Oscar Eustis. And then she introduced me to Ars Nova. And then Ars Nova invited me to come back to do work. Like it just, once you start meeting people who are all doing more or less the same thing, the world is big, but it's also very small. So go and see, I mean, it's a weird time to say that now, but like, go and see things, meet people. If you're in a program, like you'll never know, you never know who knows who, like, and that's just really how you do it.
When I met Michael, we were in a playwriting class, and he brought in pages.
Oh yes, and Ben was like my lone defender.
He got attacked by everyone in the room.
Everyone.
The professor, everyone attacked him. And to me, it was very clear that people were intimidated by his talent. And I'm not just saying that because it's been proven now, but it was like—
that was not clear to me at the time.
it was clear to me.
I was like devastated. But then Ben had got some actors together at Center Stage, and we read through the play and talked about it. Like, it was just like, and things like that were very important for my development. And I think everybody can do that stuff. Like, get your friends together to read through your work. Like, ask people, to give you feedback. Like, you'll learn over time what you need and what doesn't work for you.
It can be on Zoom. It can be like this.
Yeah, it really can.
It can be other writers or just people who are smart. You respect their opinions.
That's right.
Helpful too. I hope this was useful, inspiring something in these times. Thank you, Michael. Let's give him a round of applause, or a virtual round of applause.
Thank you, Ben. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking to you too. Hopefully we can get some Thai food soon.
Oh my gosh, that would be so good.
Bye, everybody. Enjoy
Bye.
the weekends.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.